So do you have like any tips for folks that are more diverse in their stock picks for ways that they can sort of set trailing points to perhaps take profit, sell off, and then reevaluate? Are there any things to watch for that applies beyond sort of your universe of stocks?
One of our members asked, like, Ricky, how do you deal with FOMO? I think it's the same way that I deal with not buying in early. I think the biggest way to deal with anything in this market is to make sense of it. And as long as it makes sense to you, it doesn't mean that you're going to have to make the most money or the least amount of money with that approach. It literally has to make sense to you so you can at least learn from your mistakes. And the idea of understanding where, let's say for KR, right? Kroger just recently sold off. It's finding a support level here. Let's say I decide to buy here because I see the potential for it to hit highs of $40. Knowing my track record, I tend to sell very early. I will sell when I'm up 10% because based off of previous resistance levels, this is a big enough resistance where I wouldn't mind taking profits. And at the end of the day, one of the things that I really just try to focus on is I would rather be someone that's consistently green versus someone that plans to hold beyond what is already expected and then they go from green to red. And it comes down to like asking yourself, what position have you put yourself more in? Are you someone that tends to hold too long and instead of locking in profits, you go from green to red, which is I think one of the worst feelings. And yeah, although selling early is not a glorified approach, it's at least a step in the right direction. And you can always adjust that as you're getting better at locking in profits. So my biggest focus every single time is if I see a resistance level, and again, I guess this was a bad example because it 100% exceeded my expectations where I decided to sell at these levels, but it went beyond that. But at the end of the day, I did something that made sense to me and I could have always gotten back in, right? And that's the thing that you need to remind yourself is like, yeah, it does suck when you sell too early, but if you're really so certain that it goes beyond what it is that you anticipated, then at least approaching it with a maybe smaller position size and allowing it to ride up and then locking in profits then. But again, we all have different approaches, right? I don't focus too much myself on like trailing stop losses or anything like that. I just look at previous levels or at any indication of a resistance. I might have a goal, right? I might have a goal of selling at 55 as this thing sold off because of previous resistance levels that we had here and that we had here. So it makes sense that we could experience a resistance level at 55. But if I experience a resistance level at 51, my job is to lock in profits. My job is to stay green, right? And if I sell too early there, it pulls back and it continues to uptrend, then guess what? Yeah, it sucks. I left some money on the table, but I can always get back in. And at least I still did something the majority of people can't do. And I think that's when you understand kind of the big picture is, trust me, it sucks. I get it. When you have FOMO and when you miss out on a couple of trades, but if you ask yourself, more often than not, people tend to not miss out on opportunity more than they choose to partake in it. But most likely, at least in my experience, people tend to buy too early than actually buying when it actually makes sense. And then Neal, you can speak on that, where I just feel like people always try to think about like, well, what if I miss out or what if it continues to go up? More often than not, it doesn't. And I think that's what you need to understand. It is in your best interest to lock in profits and then to reevaluate it when you're not so emotional if you want to decide to get back in.